When one thinks of the ubiquitous American railroad from this side of the Atlantic, we often think of the Santa Fe and its fantastic war bonnet scheme, making its way across the American West. Passenger trains like the Super Chief. And likewise, we also think of American freight trains as being enormous, mile-long behemoths. And we know about the short line railroads, but when we think of like major railroad freight movements between cities such as Chicago and Los Angeles, we think of these enormous freight trains. But there is a freight service that the Santa Fe ran in the 1960s and early 70s called the Super C. It was a piggyback service, meaning that there were trailers on flat cars, and surprisingly, these trains were often small. The management of the Santa Fe had an idea for an express freight service using piggyback containers on flat cars, traveling between Chicago and Los Angeles and completing the distance in under 40 hours. One of them, I believe, made it in 36 hours. It was for time-sensitive freight delivered door to door. The automotive industry and the American Postal Service were the biggest customers of this freight service. It ran for about a decade and then was discontinued. But it gives us a scope for running a highball or fast freight primary American freight service between two major cities without having a huge train. Basically, it's very modest. In fact, the version I've modeled here would be rather small. Originally, the service was designed to be run by the colossal F40 units, but the demand wasn't as big as expected, and so aging F units were taken off passenger service and run for that purpose. Here you can see the classic Santa Fe F unit with the war bonnet scheme. Now this was literally a locomotive I pulled out of the scrap box to show you can do these things very cheaply. It is a 1950s pen line body, which I changed the painting slightly. I extended the silver grille along into the war bonnet head, as you can see there, using a silver marker, going by the photographs that I've seen online. I painted the horns on the top red to match the bonnet and did some touch-ups and then sprayed it with a high gloss varnish. I put a knuckle coupler on the front, but otherwise the old American HO horn and hook couplers are on the back. The reason for this is, well, they work, and my layout is bumpy, and I'm not really into switching or shunting. I just like to run trains around. I see my layout as a kind of an impressionist painting, hence why I have these Concord containers on the first flat car and a Santa Fe trailers on the second one. These are Tyco on top of a Tyco flat car in both cases, which I've weathered with Tamiya panel liner to give the weathered wood effect on the top. I don't even know if they're correctly modeled, but they just capture the image. I like an impressionist painting on my layout. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm not looking to spend a fortune. I just want to capture that nostalgic memory. Even the F unit here is probably not correct. There was no boiler probably in the one used on this service for passenger trains, and it's probably got one brake dynamic fan on the top too many. But otherwise, it captures what I wanted to capture. The classic war bonnet single locomotive pulling a small amount of flat cars with trailers on them to Chicago. The caboose is a bay window toy. It was literally a model, a toy. It wasn't even like a serious model. I put metal wheels on them, of course. And like all my model cabooses, I have a horn and hook coupler on one end and a KD knuckle coupler on the other, depending on what I'm running and what I need to run. Heavily weathered to give it that look, and I think it looks quite smart. I populated the layout today with road names you would see in the Chicago area around 1970, Burlington Northern, the Erie Lackawanna, all the way from New Jersey into Chicago, which was the center of American railroads, and the likes of the Penn Central. setting the atmosphere correct. My layout is like a blank canvas. I can be at anywhere in many places in the world. Today, it's Chicago land. So that's it, the Super C freight service between Chicago and Los Angeles, proving you don't have to have an enormous model train to run it. The Bachmann loco is not the original type with the pancake motor. This is the guts, the internal part underneath the penline shell. It is the two-piece heavy die-cast version. Runs quite well. If you properly lubricate it and run it on a good controller, you'll get surprisingly good speeds out of it. It's a bit noisy, but I like the sound of model trains. I like the sound of the traditional model train crashing across the tracks. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're new to American model trains, don't be put off by the concept of having to model enormous trains. In fact, you don't even need multiple lash-ups of locomotives. The Santa Fe loco was often sold as a single locomotive in a toy train set, and people have often bought the Santa Fe loco just because of its such an attractive paint scheme in this war bonnet style. In fact, it was only the some of the F units and the E units that carried that, but every model of Santa Fe seems to carry that war bonnet look. But this is just to prove to you that you can create the atmosphere of a certain model prototype in a kind of an impressionistic painting form without having to be too pedantic about detail, too pedantic about every aspect of it, and just capture the essence of what you're trying to do in order to enjoy it. Because the purpose of this hobby is to have fun, is to enjoy yourself, and if you can do that without spending a lot of money, I like to get old locomotives and rolling stock and fix them up and repair them, and this is the result of this, a very inexpensive impression of the Santa Fe Super C freight service from the mid-60s to the early 1970s.